Well, hello there, folks, and welcome to the program. This is Ask the Pastor. I'm your host, John Feeks, lead pastor of New Life Sanctuary Church in Winnipeg. And today we have a very special program. Today we have Jared Esser with us from the Friends of Israel Gospel Ministry. Jared, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me on, Pastor John. I'm excited for tonight.
Yeah, me too. We want to talk about some very, very important things today. We want to get down kind of to what is central, foundational to our faith, and that's going to include national ethnic Israel. We want to understand Israel in the plans and purposes of God. We want to talk about what is Israel, and does Israel have a future or not? Has the church replaced Israel forever? These are the kinds of things we want some clarity in, because there's just all kinds of confusion out there right now.
There is.
So maybe to get the ball rolling here, why don't you say a few things about yourself by way of introduction?
Okay. Well, thank you, Pastor John. And yes, tonight's going to be, we have a lot of subjects that are going to be very complicated, but hopefully we can bring them through a lot pretty smoothly. So I minister here. I'm the coordinator of church and field staff with the Friends of Israel Gospel Ministry, and I get the blessing to be able to minister and teach to the church and really bring a lot of church history, and of course, most importantly, the Bible to the church to remind them where Israel stands within our faith. Mm-hmm. And then, along with that, I get the blessing to go out to the church and go out to the Jewish people and be able to grow relationships with them, and with the goal of being their ally, growing that friendship, and of course, sharing that who the Messiah is. His name is Jesus, and he came and he he finished the law and brought hope and salvation to all of us.
So how long have you been with Friends of Israel now?
I have been with Friends of Israel for about 5 years.
Wow.
Interning for about 2.5, and I've been a full rep for almost 3.5 almost.
Wow, very good. Okay, so I think we could all agree, no matter what kind of Christian you are, I think we can agree that Christianity has a founding document.
Yes.
And that's the Bible. We have a founder named Jesus, and we have a founding document called the Bible. The Bible is super saturated with references to Israel. Both testaments, right? Hundreds and hundreds of references to Israel, and then associated terms and epithets that refer, of course, to Israel. Oh, yes. Maybe we should start there and ask, what do we mean by Israel? What do we mean by that term?
That is a very good question, and we could really go into that, but I think simply putting it, it's a place, a land, it's a people, a religion, and I like to add in there, it's also a person.
Yeah, very good. Okay. Right. So Israel as a man goes back to the patriarch Jacob.
Yes.
In the book of Genesis 32:28, where God actually renames Jacob, calls him Israel.
Exactly.
Because he's one who struggles with God.
Exactly.
I think the term has that kind of connotation. But you're right, Israel is also a land. It's referred, I think it's 31 times, the land of Israel. You read that phrase, that land of Israel, and the first reference is in 1 Samuel chapter 13, verse 19. Yeah. And that is a document, 1 Samuel, it must go back 900 BC, something like that.
Yeah.
And they're already talking about the land as a geographical location.
And again, if you really want to go back to accuracy when the land began, you're going to Genesis 12, 2-3, all the way to Abraham, where God made a covenant, gave him a blessing, and he had Abraham look all over the land and said, this is yours. And it really links into, as we were saying, we had the 4, but really those 3 big characteristics, because what's promised in Genesis 12, 1-3, or really you find that in a couple chapters there, what does God promise Abraham? A land, a special nation, it's not named yet, and that these people will have a faith, a religion. They'll be God's people. So there's also a religion there. Yeah. So there's those 3 aspects, even down to Genesis 12, that has it all there.
Yeah. So we're talking to folks out there perhaps who are very new to all this. They don't really understand the Jewish roots of our faith. The whole thing gets started after the flood, a few generations after the great flood, the Noachian flood or the Genesis flood,
Yes.
when God calls a man named Abram from Mesopotamia. And he says, you are going to be the father of many nations. And he says, in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. Abram, he has his name changed to Abraham. And Abraham has a son, Isaac, and Isaac has a son named Jacob, whose name is changed to Israel. And Jacob, of course, has 12 sons, and each son becomes the head or progenitor of one of the 12 tribes of Israel. The people group called Israel.
Exactly.
But in terms of a geographical location, you read twice in Matthew, the 2nd chapter, that the Holy Family went into the land of Israel twice. The land of Israel.
Exactly.
Yeah, and as far as the geographical extent of the land, I think it's in Genesis 15 where God says this is going to extend from the great from the Nile, I think it is, or the river of Egypt. You would say
It's the river of Egypt,
presumably the Nile, to the great river, the Euphrates. So
it goes.
It's pretty huge block of territory,
and it's a reality that God promised them, but actually to this day. Hasn't really been completed, because if it is from the Nile, if it is from that river, even at the height of Israel's kingdom and history, they never did reach it under Solomon and David and Solomon. They were cut short. It's that greater, well, some people will call it greater Israel. It's a term that's used often to weaponize it against the modern state of Israel. But this promised land eventually is a land that is, I believe, saved for a special king in mind one day that will come to Israel.
Yeah. So with that, let's I don't know how we can do this. We're going to try under God. But I want to talk a little bit. Let's go chronologically through Israel's history as it's laid out in the Bible. Of course, I just mentioned it begins with the call of Abram.
Yes.
He is over in Mesopotamia. He's in the land between the rivers.
Yeah.
And God brings him over into the land of Canaan, this territory we now know as Israel. And he promised him all that territory, him and his descendants forever. So what are some of the high points from that point on? What are some of the high points biblically in the history of this special people group, this family of Abraham?
Well, I think we can't continue forward without realizing this special promise that mentioned that God would bless Abraham and this nation coming up and curse his enemies. And it's a promise that you see all the way going through Genesis, really going into Exodus, that you see that it's this transferable promise. It goes to Abraham's son Isaac. And then from Isaac, it goes to Jacob. And then you see, I believe it's in Genesis 35. Oh, sorry, around Genesis 35, you see it beforehand getting given to Jacob. And then after Jacob has been made to Israel, the children of Israel get brought back to that original spot in Bethel. And they're given a repeat kind of, this is yours now, and it's not going to move. Kind of like this nation has been secured. And this is where it's ending. There's no more, this is the nation. Right. You see kind of it as a people group, really, Genesis 35 and 34, you see the writer of the Tanakh, of Genesis, Moses, saying, and Israel went. And you see that little hint that the people, the country, the ethnicity of Israel is born at that point.
Yeah. And then God had promised Abraham that future generations of his descendants would end up in bondage, in slavery, in bitter bondage in Egypt, which is exactly what happened. And that led to the Exodus under Moses.
Yes.
And so the book of Exodus documents how God broke the backbone of Egyptian domination over his people.
Exactly.
10 supernatural sign miracles and judgments brought them through the Red Sea and to Mount Sinai, where they received the law. And Israel was supposed to observe that law. There were special blessings and privileges attached to obedience to the law.
Exactly.
And there were curses if they didn't, right?
Exactly. And it's interesting because the law really provided that start of what we would call Israel being holy, or that religious part, where it goes forward. That's when the law was given. And really that law was a little bit of a test, wasn't it, for Israel? If you don't follow the law, or you don't follow it the way you're supposed to, then you will be exiled. But if
From the land.
from the land specifically,
Right.
and actually a lot of curses around it too,
Right.
for the people, suffering and a whole bunch of stuff. But specifically, there's the big theme: you will be exiled out of the land.
Yeah.
But there was, if you could correctly follow the law, you could stay in the land. And I think it's a little bit of a hint of how the Jewish people and what the really backbone of the faith was. Because the really true understanding of the law at, I think, any point in time in human history has been, well, we as humans can't follow it.
Yeah, that's the whole theme
Exactly.
of the New Testament epistle
Yeah.
to the Hebrews.
Exactly.
Was that like central to the law was the religious system, right? The law has 613 commandments. Some of it has to do with keeping civil order and things of that sort. But central, the central place of that Mosaic law is the tabernacle temple system
Exactly.
that prescribed how we might approach a holy God, being sinful people.
Exactly.
And the writer to the Hebrews in the New Testament says, if there's one thing we know for sure, the law taught its own inadequacy, right? It was never meant to be a permanent solution to our sin problem. It was pointing ahead to Jesus, who is the permanent solution.
And it always there's always a hint going back even down to their, remember, within the Jewish mind, it's always about looking back at history. But how did the original patriarch of Israel, Abraham, come to that relationship with God? It's always that hint that the point of the law was that not that you were perfect, because let's face it, nowhere in Israel's history have they ever followed that law. Not even the greatest kings, but it was by faith. A hint of that currency going forward, that you can't make the law, but you're to have faith in God to be able to save you from this law. And that's when you really look at the high times of Israel's history, and we could then go forward into the highlights, going into the Judges, going to Saul and David are really good examples of that too. Solomon, and all the way to present day, how that blessing and curse that the law brought of staying in the land really worked. Have faith that God would save you from your sins. You can stay in the land. No, you'll eventually be torn out from it.
Yeah, major point, folks. Major point that Jared's bringing up here. When God called Abram and made promises, he made covenant promises to Abraham in Genesis 15. Now, the text says in verse 6, Abraham believed God, and it was accounted to him for righteousness. And that economy there, where God looks at our faith and imputes to us righteousness in response to the exercise of faith, that has never changed. Not from the Old Testament to the New Testament. That is the consistent economy that God applies to humankind. And in fact, the Apostle Paul will make reference to that in the light of New Testament realities. See, this has not changed, and this would be going back to Romans, the 4th chapter, where Paul's very clear on this, that we're saved by grace through faith, and not by works. By the works of the law, no flesh shall be saved or justified. So that's really important. But again, going back to what you said there, according to the Sinai law that Israel was supposed to live in accordance with, if they're going to be disobedient to God, God says, in effect, that land that I promised Abraham and his descendants, it still belongs to you, but you will not enjoy it. And God would send Gentile military aggression would come into Israel's borders and subjugate them and drag them off, and they would not be able to enjoy the land.
And it's one of the most unfortunate proven facts in history, be it biblical history and history in general, that a secular person would even look at. What did we see? The judges constantly going back and forth. Saul, when he's disobedient. Oh, what's happening? Philistines and Amorites are kind of enemies of Israel, are starting to come in. It really comes to show with Assyria taking out and pretty much permanently exiling northern Israel out, and eventually Babylon taking out Judea.
Yeah.
And then you will see them brought back in, led in by a Gentile nation. And then eventually, because of their lack of faith, it happens again with the Romans. And you can even go in other history. There's been many times that Israel has tried to go into places and get back into the land, but they're always thrown back out.
Yeah.
The only time that we haven't seen this, as for now, is as they've been brought into the land in 1948. But even there, the Bible has unfortunate news that we can't change. It's truth, isn't it?
No.
Is that there will be another time of reckoning when the Gentiles will be allowed to rise up against her.
Yeah.
Jeremiah calls it the time of Jacob's trouble.
Right. So just for the folks listening, just so you got a chronological picture here, when Moses brought the children of Israel out of bondage in Egypt, they wandered in the desert, came into the land of promise under Joshua. And after Joshua was done his pilgrimage on the earth, and he died, Israel got ruled by a succession of judges, not kings, but judges. And during that period, Israel would wax and wane in terms of her faithfulness to God. And when she was faithless, God would send Gentile military aggression against her. And they would cry out, and God would raise up a judge, and he would deliver them, and they would have their freedom.
Yeah.
And Israel would do good as long as the judge was alive, and then he would die, and the whole thing would start over again. And under the kings, we had Assyria coming in, wiping out the northern kingdom of Israel, and then Babylon came and exiled the southern kingdom of Judah. So that it happened to Israel exactly the way God promised.
It did.
But God made other promises to Israel too.
Yep.
God promised Israel that in the future she would be a nation of believers, and a special king would reign and rule on the throne. And that's really where we want to zero in on, this Messiah, this anointed one, or in English we would call him the Christ of Israel. Lots and lots of passages there. I'm not sure which passage we'd like to read, but there's lots in the Bible that promise Israel that there's going to be one coming who will reign and rule over them in righteousness.
I like to think, you know what's my favorite? I love Jeremiah 30. I'm so excited to get there. But really, what you were talking about, Pastor John, really, my go-to chapter is Isaiah 11. Isaiah 11, starting at verse 10, it goes down after it describes this beautiful kingdom of supernatural peace, no wars. The lion lays down with the ox. The lamb with the wolf.
The wolf, yeah.
We always say it the other way, but
And isn't Isaiah 11? It's describing a future kingdom state that looks a lot like Genesis.
Exactly.
Right? It's a restoration back to Eden-like condition.
But the first 9 verses has that, and then it says in verse 10, and in that day there shall be the root of Jesse. It's an acronym. You see, the Messiah was never really in words like, the Messiah is coming. It was always a reference of some sort of kind of this man, never sometimes even directly looked at as the Messiah, coming within the prophets and Old Testament. But it really gets into this thing of, what happens? This root of Jesse, this Messiah comes and what? Gathers his people, the dispersed of Israel, the outcasts of Judah. And really, if you look through Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, there's just so many promises of you'll be redeemed one day, you'll be redeemed one day, which really would bring us to Jeremiah 31, I think.
Let's read the Christmas verse. Let's just read this. This is Isaiah chapter 9 and verse 6. This is Old Testament. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulder. His name will be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end, upon the throne of David and over his kingdom, to order it and establish it with judgment and justice from that time forward, even forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. So the promise very clearly is that a descendant of King David was going to come and sit on David's throne.
Yeah.
over a restored Israel.
Yeah.
And that has not happened.
Nope.
We're waiting for that to happen. And I think that's why many Jews reject
Yeah.
Jesus as the Messiah, because they say if he's the Messiah, the world should be perfect.
And
it's not.
Have you looked at the Middle East every now and then? It doesn't describe what we see in Isaiah 11 and all these other places. There's no peace there.
Yeah. So that's a pretty good segue into what I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
Does national ethnic Israel have a future under God? And I think we have to say yes, it absolutely has a future.
Yes.
Because what I just read there in Isaiah chapter 9, that dovetails perfectly with the angelic announcement to Mary, the Virgin Mary, about her son who would sit on the throne of his father David. And that's an earthly throne, and Jesus never sat on the throne of David, has he?
No, he didn't really sit on any throne while he was here that I can think of.
No, but so it has to be at his second coming. That's sort of what we believe there.
Exactly.
And are you thinking about Acts chapter 1? In Acts chapter 1, right at the beginning of the book, we're told that Jesus raised from the dead to glory, preached for 40 days to his apostles about the kingdom. And Jesus said, now go to Jerusalem and wait for the promise of my Father. And they asked Jesus, will you restore the kingdom to Israel at that time? Yeah. And what did he say? It's not for you to know the times and seasons, which the Father has put under his own hand, but you'll receive power to be my witnesses. He did not say, you got it wrong, boys, there's no future for Israel. He did not say that.
We could just go... I can't tell you how many times I've talked to Christians and they just glaze over the ascension like it's this, it just happened. It's like, this is a pivotal just event that changes our understanding of this whole book. Mm-hmm. Like, I can't, it's not our subject of today, but I love the ascension and the realities it really brings in. Mm-hmm. And that it really makes this all of a sudden come alive even more for us.
Okay, so we have a question here.
Yes.
We know that in AD 70, the Jews tried to throw Rome out of their land.
Yes.
It ended very badly. Rome destroyed Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, killed thousands upon thousands of Jews, and they were dispersed all over the world, and they didn't have a homeland. They were just scattered among the nations, right? Now, in 1917, I think it is, we have the Balfour Declaration.
Yes.
And the idea was that the Jews are looking for a homeland. They've been dispersed for 2,000 years. And after World War II, in 1948, the UN recognized the statehood of Israel, mm-hmm. and they were given a geographical territory within the land promised to Abraham.
Yes, okay. After it got cut up a couple times.
Yeah, it got chopped up. 1922.
There was an original promise that went back on a couple times.
Right, exactly. and as soon as they got into that land and were recognized as a nation again, they got attacked by their Muslim neighbors, and in a bunch of defensive wars that they won.
Yes.
Now here's the big question.
Yeah.
What now is Palestine, and who are the Palestinians? Because that is a huge question that people have. What is Palestine, and who are the Palestinians?
This is such a hard term to really go through because there really is two meanings. There's the biblical meaning, and then what I call the historical meaning. Because really, biblically, the word Palestine just comes from the Hebrew word that represents the Philistines. So when you say Palestine, the Romans, when Emperor Hadrian, due to the Bar Kokhba revolt, the Jews had brought in their false messiah. The revolt happened, failed. That name was plastered on as a way to purposely try to remove any historical connections to the land, in a way to spite any of the Jews that still live there.
So in Old Testament times,
yes,
we had people living in what is now today Gaza, in that area.
Yes.
They're called the Philistines, the ancient
yes.
enemies of the Jews.
Exactly.
And so all these centuries later, when around 135, I think it is, when the Jews tried to overthrow Rome again, when they got squashed, the reigning emperor at that time said, okay, this land is now called Palestina.
Exactly.
Just to stick it to the Jews.
And to give a little bit, if you want to know who the Philistines are, they're really, it all the way goes back to Noah. They're from the sons of Ham, a cursed people group that are, as it was prophesied, would always serve Shem, which Israel, and even the Arabs are a part of that line, which is quite interesting. But that would be the way biblically it looks. And they were geographically always within that area we would know today as Gaza, maybe a little farther up as well. God even told them to be totally destroyed, but in the time of when Joshua came to bring the land, he failed at that.
So the people indigenous to the land
Yes.
of Canaan,
Yes.
Joshua was told, drive them out.
Yes.
Drive them out. It was the imperative.
Yes.
But if they want to stay and try to battle it out with you, God says, then you just obliterate them. I think that was the idea there. But the modern day Palestinians, they seem to come from all over the place. Iraq and Yemen, Egypt, Syria.
Exactly.
They come from all there. I don't think it's ever been suggested or even, much less proven that the modern Palestinian can trace his ancestry back to the Philistines. I don't think that's...
It's, yes,
even on the table.
exactly. And that's, I'm just wanting to make that sure. That understanding's there. That's the biblical definition. And when we go to the historical part, because by the time this all happens in Rome, the Philistines have been gone for a while, obliterated by Syria, Babylon, and all the stuff in the past. So Rome put this name, Philistina, on this whole area of land, including some of northern Syria and some of going over, southern Syria and some areas around into the Jordan, and that was their provincial province. So everyone that would be referenced or living, it would be like living in Manitoba, right? Mm-hmm. You could be, I'm a main German background of heritage, German French, but I'm a Manitoban.
Because you're living...
Because I live in this province of Manitoba. Right. But that actually, funny enough, got removed when the Ottoman Empire took that out. It was only reference, like it was actually for centuries reference. Oh, the district of Jerusalem was what it was. And it wasn't until the British came back after World War I, because you know their roots are in Rome, they brought, because in Europe they held that term the whole time. And then they brought it back and put it in place and put it on everyone. Jew, Arab, non-Arab, mm-hmm. Greek, anyone who lived in that land was known as a Palestinian. And the Arabs even at that time were like, no, that's not what we are. And so when you really see it originally, and that's what makes it so confusing, is before Israel became a state and they were growing their infrastructure, they were all Palestinians.
Yeah.
The Palestinian orchestra became the Israeli orchestra.
Right.
So that term is a geographical term, not an ethnic term.
Right. So the people who are, say, free Palestine and so on, as though Palestine is a national ethnic people group with identifiable, a solid, a history with well-established borders and a government, stretching back many thousands of years. It's just not true. I don't know who's the first king of Palestine. It just doesn't.
The British.
It seems to just be, yeah. And that's interesting because it's the European colonizers, the white colonizers, that brought that term back. And just plastered it on anyone.
In their words, yeah.
In that territory. A lot more we could say about that.
A lot.
Here's a question people have: are the Jews living in Israel today really the descendants of Jacob? Because remember, the Jews first of all, you've got to admit that is the ancestral homeland of the Jews that we read about in the Bible. Archaeologically, historically, it would be absurd to challenge that.
You would have to deny Jesus Christ and Christianity for that to be a reality.
Well, there's a thing called the Titus Arch in Rome.
Yeah.
The Romans are documenting
Exactly.
how they destroyed Jerusalem and looted the temple.
So
the Europeans know that was the ancestral homeland of the Jews.
Yeah.
But a different question now. These Jews that came back in the 20th century when Israel was officially recognized its statehood, are these actually descendants of Jacob?
It's a popular and very new question today, Pastor John. I say it I say it kind of almost jokingly before. Oh, you would have, if you think that the Jews weren't in that national homeland before, you'd have to remove Christianity, because that's almost how ridiculous this next question is, because all of history, it really is a naivety of history that comes to this conclusion that the Jews, say in Northern Europe, because lots of the Ashkenazi were from there, are not Jews because they've been interbred or something like that. Remember, the promise to Abraham was not only on ethnic grounds, it was also on religious grounds. And we have history all throughout the Bible, and then all throughout, again, multiple nations throughout history, that these are indeed the Jews. But I want to get to a Bible verse here. I say, where was it? Yeah, Deuteronomy 28:64 really makes it clear. God says he will scatter the Jews everywhere. Like, this is prophesied that they're going to be scattered into their lands and they're going to be there for a bit. That's the Bible speaking. Ezekiel 11:14-21 is crystal clear. They're going to be brought back. And God identifies them in these nations they're scattered to. You don't think he knew that there would be intermarriage and stuff like that?
Yeah.
He knew that. So on a biblical front, you see this. And even Jesus in Luke 21:24, Jesus confirms this understanding because he says Israel will be distinct from his time in the future when he comes back. There's this hint. When I come back, you're still going to be distinct. So one of the questions for people who have this theory is, well, then who are the real Jews? And whenever I've asked that, no one can answer it. But then going even to the history side, Holy Roman Empire, you see there's a key word that connects it. It's really well. It's called the word Christ killers. And every single European country almost to this point in history has linked that term back to this group, religious group and people group who identify themselves as Jews, who say that they come from the land, and their enemies. Even a title that links back to that time, to Jesus.
I was going to mention too, like anthropologically, we know that when the temple was destroyed in AD 70, religiously the Jews had to innovate.
Yeah.
Right? So sacrifice is no longer central to the religious system, and so now it's acts of loving kindness and prayer.
Yeah.
That's become central. But nevertheless, they're going to maintain strict adherence to the Jewish calendar, to the dietary restrictions, dress codes and so on. They have a lot of detailed instructions in that Mosaic law. They're obligated to follow. I mean, all kinds of intricate rules, regulations, restrictions. And it absolutely distinguishes these people from their neighbors.
Yeah.
And that wherever they went, they seemed to be a marginalized group. And I don't think it was very attractive to people to become associated with them, to get incorporated into their group. They're always, like you said, they're called Christ killers.
And the Jews have a view of, especially as they're more religious throughout that time, it's not popular. It happens, but it's not popular to intermarry. It does happen, but it's looked down upon as well. So it's, again, that distinct culture holds very firmly.
Yeah, I don't think it's likely at all that these people that came and started buying up land in the ancestral homeland to the Jews of the Bible, that they're not really ethnic Jews. I think they got to be. I mean, as I say, their lifestyle, their strict adherence to all the minute regulations and restrictions in the law, that would really distinguish them from the other people out there in the nations where they were scattered. So with that, I just want to say just a couple minutes on how do we reach these people with the gospel, because Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 3 that there's a veil over their minds right now. They are blinded. They have the Bible, they have the Old Testament that prophesies about Jesus, and he came right on schedule, and he did the things he was promised that he would do.
Yes.
And national ethnic Israel as a people group reject Jesus.
Yes.
How do we reach these people?
That is a very good question. And I'll start off with a little bit of a joke, because I saw it personally not too long ago, which was, don't go up to your local rabbi as a Christian and tell him, I'm here and my role is to make you jealous of my faith.
Oh, yeah.
It's probably not going to end up too well. It wouldn't end up too well if it was the opposite way around. With that joke aside, it really comes down to, first, how do you share the gospel with anyone? You build a relationship with them. You create a friendship. You say you're there for them. You help them in ways you can, and you figure it out. And so you grow that relationship where you can, have that dialogue back and forth, and you have to break through hundreds and hundreds, 1,000+ years, almost 2,000 years of persecution from the Christian side over, because there's a hard, it's a lot better today, but 2 generations ago, it was a lot harder to get through that. So you grow that relationship for them. And then what I do is I use the law. What's the law meant to do biblically? It's meant to convict the heart and show that you're not perfect. And guess what? It's easy. Are the Jews following the law? Are they sacrificing in their temple? Are they this? According to their very own, to the Tanakh, to the Torah, there is no hope. There is no salvation if they understood it their way, that they had to follow it, work it out. Even in their standards, religiously, all the way back to the Pharisees, they couldn't do it. So they have no hope. So that's when you make them think a little bit, because rabbinic Judaism has gone that kind of out of their mind, this idea that they're sinners needing to be saved. It's you almost have to, it seems very strange, you have to reteach them that they need a covering, they need a sacrifice. And then you do your best in loving and kindness, share the gospel. And that's where the prophets really come in for me. Whenever you're sharing your faith with the Jew and wanting to really hammer a point, don't use the New Testament. Leave that till later.
Right.
Because everything's in the Old Testament, or in their words, the Tanakh. And ours is the same as theirs. Exactly. So, and then you point at little things. You go look and be like, well, why did David say to his Lord, to the Lord?
Psalm 110.
Psalm 110.
Fantastic place to go. In Psalm 110, we're told that David's descendant is also David's Lord.
Yes.
And that only makes sense in terms of Christian New Testament theology, where we believe that Jesus, in his human nature, is a descendant of David, but in his divine nature, he's David's creator.
Exactly.
And that only makes sense. And Jesus even challenged, I think it's in Matthew 22, where he challenged the religious leaders with that question, right? But if you keep going in Psalm 110, we have this one who's also a priest after the order of Melchizedek, a very mysterious figure in Genesis 14. And he's a priest forever according to the oath that God took. And he is better than any Levitical priest. A Levitical priest functioning under the old covenant, the Sinai covenant. But see, the Bible promises that there's this better priest coming.
There is.
And he is one and the same as the Messiah. And so I would recommend that, I know it's New Testament, but I would challenge Jewish people, if they have an open mind at all, go to the New Testament and read that epistle to the Hebrews.
Yes.
And just read that. And I'd love to hear what kind of feedback we get from that.
And what's, I think, another important thing that we as Christians need to do, especially with Jewish people, but in general, anybody who's more religious especially, really anyone, ask questions and listen. It's kind of how Jesus did it, right? Ask questions and kind of made people think. Sometimes made statements that were a little bit absurd to somebody just listening, and if they really wanted to know more, they would come ask. I do that all the time. And again, not to be there for tricking. I'm very honest with my Jewish friends. I'm a Christian. This is what I believe. I have an idea what you believe, but I would like to learn more. I'm not here to kind of be sneaking and steal you away. No, I wanted to really show you what's the completion of your religion. Not replacement, the completion. Fulfillment. And really how, again, go back to Jeremiah 31. What's the end result? Because me as a Christian, I've joined in with you. To me right now, the Jewish people are my older brother who's estranged from the Lord right now. And I am so praying that they would come back into the family. And I know they're going to one day. But the question is who? How many? It might not be my dear friend that I know, right?
Yeah. It's the craziest thing, because in the Bible, Israel, on the one hand, very definitely is God's special covenant people group. He's made unconditional covenant promises to national ethnic Israel, believing national ethnic Israel. And on the other hand, Israel, as a national ethnic entity, has been sometimes worse than her pagan neighbors in terms of moral depravity.
Yeah.
And so we don't give Israel a good report card on everything Israel does. On the other hand, we don't believe that God is done with Israel forever. And you and I both agree,
Yes.
in the future, Israel is going to wake up and God is
Yes.
going to reactivate and restore that nation.
Yes.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, again, I'm the messenger, I don't write the stuff. I
Yeah.
reference it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, because of this sinfulness, it actually takes a little bit of pain, actually a lot of pain. It breaks my heart. I was in Poland. I got to be on the, it's a Jewish event, Life of the Living, or a Walk for the Living, sorry. And they go to Auschwitz-Birkenau, from Auschwitz 1 to Auschwitz-Birkenau. And you're seeing everyone's having their hashtag, never again, never again. You want to know what breaks my heart? It really pushes me to do ministry and to continue my friendships and to share and grow those relationships.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it will be again.
Well, before I ask you about Friends of Israel and the resources that they have available, I just want to say this irrational, I would say satanically energized hatred for national ethnic Israel, in my opinion, it's because God has promised to restore them, and that Jesus, as we read earlier today, he's going to come and reign and rule over a restored Israel on the throne of his father David. Now, Satan's figuring if he can obliterate that people group, then there's nothing for Jesus to come back to, and he would have proven God a covenant breaker. And this is what he's after, and this is why he activates people all throughout the ages. He raises them up to mobilize tremendous military opposition against Israel in the hopes that he can obliterate that people group. But you and I know Jeremiah 31. God says Israel stays a nation unless you can knock sun, moon, stars out of the sky. Israel stays.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so before we close it up for today, let us know about Friends of Israel. There might be people listening, they want to know more about these things, and that ministry has the resources.
Exactly. So the Friends of Israel Gospel Ministry has a lot of things. We have the American side and the Canadian side, but we kind of all mesh together as one. But the biggest resources, go to our website at foicanada.com. There you can go and you sign up for our IMG. We've been writing it since before Israel was even born as a nation, and we go into the Bible and really go into detail more some of these things.
IMG, what does that stand for?
Israel, My Glory.
That's the
magazine.
magazine.
That's the magazine.
Yeah.
We offer, contact me if you'd like a free year. You can just email me at jester@foi.org, and I can get you set up. And we also have a program if you want to learn more about the Bible, about Jewish culture, and some of the stuff we talked about today. We also offer online free Bible studies, we call it. It's called Equip. So you can go online, go to FOI Canada or foi.org, and you will find in one of the top things of programs, it will say Equip. You want to become an equipper. And when you go into that, you can sign up for free. You get access to all of our prior stuff, and you go into some scholars, solid Bible teachers, some of our representatives that really teach this, the Bible, and really let us know what to think about Israel, Christianity, history, the future, all that
Tremendous
stuff.
resource. Tremendous.
Yeah.
Jared, thank you so much for coming on the program. We really appreciate your expertise in these areas. Friends, if you'd like to know more, reach out to me at johnf@careofwinnipeg.org. Visit our website. Come join us at church, 618 Muriel Street in Winnipeg. We're going to have a Good Friday service coming up at the end of this week. Again, Easter Sunday morning, we're going to celebrate the Lord's resurrection from the dead. We'd love to have you come visit us or reach out in any way you can. We just want to be a help to you. So with that, we'll say good night and God bless you.
Good night and God bless everyone.